Black belt, Plato in the martial arts. I was about 5 or 6 years old when I had my first Plato-ish thought. Of course, I knew nothing about Plato then, but I experienced something which now I identify with Plato. It was a recurring idea that I experienced, sort of namelessly for several years after that first encounter. What was it? At around 5 years old, my parents signed me up to take karate lessons. The style was Shotokan, so your basic 1980s Karate Kid type of thing. That film, so iconic, by the way, was nevertheless more like a family show to me, a light and approachable thing. My father and I used to watch several movies together, mostly violent ninja stuff, the real stuff, grim, mysterious, bloody. Bruce Lee, who was a philosophy major, was there as well, of course. I was born just a little too late for that golden era of 70s kung fu classics, but eventually found them. The real star for me, though, was Sho Kosugi, who truly brought ninjutsu onto the screen. And I met the man himself when I was 5. Kosugi was giving a demonstration at whatever gym it was. My parents took me, and I knew a few things by then. I wanted to be like certain characters. I wanted to be Darth Vader. I wanted to be a ninja. And I wanted a black belt. I said to my mother before meeting Sho, Mom, can I have one of those black belts, please? I guess I thought it was just another fashion choice. And as a kid, I was into the superhero costumes, flowing capes, cool colors, and invincible fighters. This was another cool outfit to wear, pretending to be like and emulating those who wore them, but as me. My parents both laughed at my request and explained that I would have to take lessons and earn a black belt. The first belt you get, they said, will be white. I understood. And really, I wasn't just interested in the clothes. I wanted sincerely to be able to do all of those things that those characters could do. I wanted to know how to do them, and at no point did I think that I wasn't going to be able to do it. All of it. I didn't really know what would be so difficult. Show me how and what to do, and I'll do it. After a little time, I went from white to yellow to blue belt before my family moved to a new state and eventually found a new dojo where I could continue to study. That was the progression of colored belts that my particular dojo used where I started, and the next dojo allowed me to test and qualify for the blue belt that I had already earned in order to confirm that I could hold it. My new dojo went from blue to 3 levels of brown, and then to black. The meaning and order of the colors vary from one style to another, from one dojo to another, etc. There's plenty of explanation and analysis available online about it by people who are more qualified than myself. Here, I'm just speaking about my own experience. Before moving to a new state and dojo, though, even at the white belt and definitely the yellow belt levels, we were learning not just basic stances, blocks, kicks, and punches, but katas. And it is this that I really consider to be my first Plato-ish encounter. The word kata can mean different things, but basically in this context, it is usually translated as form. Yes, I know, Plato, forms, etc., i.e., a set series of movements, usually beginning at a certain spot, going all over with different steps and moves, and if done properly, finishing at the same spot from which you began. It seemed simple enough, but as a kid, nothing much was explained to me about the kata, and I did not really know why I was being told to memorize and execute these particular series of movements. Was it a formula for how to win a fight? Something like follow these steps in any fight and you will win? Was it an imaginary fight? If it is an imaginary fight, then who is my opponent? What are they doing? Is it one opponent or many? Is this how a real fight goes? Of these possible options, it seemed to me at first that imagining many opponents was the one that made the most sense, because movements go in so many different directions, first going one way, then turning to the complete opposite direction, and so on. Unless that is one opponent is somehow really good at changing locations. Either way, though, how could we predict what an opponent or opponents would do? Does following the kata force them to do what you want or expect? On top of all of this, there were strikes and stances that only seemed to happen in the katas. We did not practice or learn them separately. In a way, this aspect made more sense than an imaginary fight, namely that the kata was a way of teaching different maneuvers. But why only through the kata? I started to think that maybe the katas were a kind of physical textbook or a way of gathering all of the moves and stances, strikes, blocks, kicks, etc., into a kind of kata database of moves. Probably I did not think of things in these terms at that time, but somehow I knew that new things were being introduced through the katas, whereas the other exercises were reinforcing them. Again, though, not all of them. Of course, I did not articulate these questions. Basically, I just did what I was told and tried to do the best I could. We were not asking, but why this and why that and why here? There was no analysis or explanation. Just do this, learn it, and then there will be more. Each kata was taught move by move. Sometimes we would watch someone do the whole thing, but mostly we learned a few steps at a time and then wait to learn the next few until eventually learning the final steps and then executing all of them together as one kata. So you learn the first kata and then you begin to learn in the same step-by-step fashion the second kata, and so on alongside the other exercises and activities in class. This then, of course, led to other questions. Are the higher numbered katas more advanced, more difficult? It seemed as though they were, and each new kata would feature at least one unique new move, sometimes repeated in later katas, but sometimes only occurring in one of them. So they were not completely linear or axiomatically building from one to the other, at least not completely. I did not really notice this aspect until I was repeatedly told to perform kata number one, even after having learned other katas, later ones. Was I being punished? Was I doing poorly at the new ones? Being told to go back to the earlier ones? Haven't I moved on? Why do I keep doing these simpler ones as well as the newer and more difficult katas? I was making some incorrect inferences, constantly, it seems, trying to figure out what these katas were all about. One erroneous thought I had was that if I am learning a new kata, then that must mean I have sufficiently mastered the one before it. No, I was wrong, resoundingly wrong. I was wrong to think of them as a progression, even though the earlier ones might be less complicated. Still, the idea that you could master a kata ever, that was wrong. One never truly masters a kata, even the first one. And this is where things begin to get a little Plato-ish. As I grew older, I began exploring other styles of martial arts. I will not list them all, but the two Chinese styles that I loved the most were praying mantis kung fu and tai chi. In my Shotokan, which is Japanese Okinawan style, in my Shotokan dojo, I started learning weapons, going to competitions, and holding one-on-one lessons with my sensei. Sometimes these would be learning longer and more obscure, complicated techniques, but sometimes it would just be 2 hours of him saying, "Here's a dagger, try and stab me." It was a real one. And after having been thrown across the room forever, I would emerge bruised and exhausted from all of my failed attempts at step. These lessons, by the way, are so important, both physically and psychologically, but also for greater understanding of the art. Yet what also changed was that my confusion about the kata was now less of a confusion and more of a mystery to be investigated. Indeed, it was now my bedrock, my compass, and my guide. Not as this or that particular kata, but as the fact that no matter how well or how perfectly executed, it would never actually be perfect. It was an ideal that could not be fully physically realized. In other words, practice makes imperfect. All one can do was come closer to the perfection, approximate it better, and that was the task. When all else fails, go to a kata. When you are lost, depressed, angry, go to a kata. When you are envious, narcissistic, or anxious and insecure, go to a kata. When you are helpless, oppressed, restricted, and confined, go to a kata. When all is well and wonderful, when you are on the top, when you're on top of the world, hubristic even, like an Icarus in flight, go do a kata. Likewise, philosophy, as the love of wisdom, is never the possession of wisdom. Likewise, those variously colored belts are all absorbed by the black that is all colors. Likewise, the black belt is not the end point, but the beginning of one's approximation of the ideal. I am not myself truly convinced that this is a so-called Platonic idea, because actually I do not interpret Plato in this theory of the forms manner, at least not fully or in the traditional way. Nevertheless, it is easy to see the connection with Plato and Socrates in the very impossibility of ever truly achieving the form, the kata. As a black belt, you are allowed to teach as well as learn. And as my dissertation advisor, Dmitry Nikulin, once said to me when I was completing my Ph.D. in philosophy, in teaching, we learn. Earning that black belt and earning the Ph.D., when they are both done and understood properly, have this, it is just the beginning feature in common. All of this is at the heart of martial arts and at the heart of so much, indeed, possibly everything we do. From the mundane to the spectacular, we can ask about anything. What is its kata? To put it in Socratic terms, knowing that you do not know, realizing that wisdom is knowing that you are not wise, knowing that no matter how well executed, you will never truly perform the kata is actually, however, not enough. The essential difference is not that for all of your training and studying, you eventually realize that you do not know anything or that you will never master a kata. No, that would be too simple. I must know not simply that I do not know, but why I do not know. I must know not simply that my execution of a kata is not perfect, but why or how it is not perfect. I must know this not generally, but in every detail and specifically on every single occasion. In teaching, we learn means that we learn how to learn for ourselves without a teacher. It is not enough to say, I do not know. I must be able to say, I do not know because of this, whatever this might be on a particular occasion, and then go investigate it. It is not enough to say, I did not perform the kata perfectly because of this, whatever this might be on that particular occasion, and then go improve its performance. As I write this, too, I am aware that certain things begin to sound cliche, and that is yet another example of the task. A cliche, as the cliche about cliches goes. A cliche is a cliche for a reason. Yes, but do I know what that reason is? Do I understand what the teacher becomes the student, for example, really means? I try to write about this in a way that gets beyond or behind the cliche, where the cliche is not actually the thing to start from, but the thing to arrive at. As Eliot wrote, in my beginning is my end, in my end is my beginning. Yes, just like a kata.